Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Inky Thoughts podcast. Today, I have finally managed to wrangle a guest I've been trying to get on the podcast for quite a while. He's a wily one, might be the Scottish descent he has. Heritage, I mean, not descent. That was a weird Danish fib there. But we are going to be talking about some sensitive topics today. My guest today has quite a bit of experience with several different, belong to several different marginalized groups. First of all, he's a tattoo professor. That's the number one. That's already a marginalized group, even though he knows quite a few doctors with tattoos nowadays. We've talked about it even before the podcast started. He's also proudly and beautifully queer, and he is disabled. But I will not talk about the diagnosis or disability because I am really rubbish at remembering the long names for many of these, and mispronouncing or miscategorizing is quite annoying. I know for a fact from having known several disabled people. So I think before I jibber jabber too much about this, I'll throw it to Dunk to introduce himself.
Well, thank you, Mads. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. I'm Duncan Cameron. I'm a professor of microbiology at the University of Manchester. I'm very, very queer and make no bones about that. And I'm also quite profoundly disabled. I suffer from a neurodegenerative condition called ataxia, which causes you to lose control of your lower limbs. And upper limbs for that matter. So I'm a full-time wheelchair user as well. It sometimes affects my voice, so if my voice starts to slur, I apologise. I will try and work through it.
Well, it's good. It's good to know, so I don't think you're having an immediate emergency.
It
Apart
has
from that, we'll
happened.
probably...
It has happened.
Yeah, I can imagine because a lot of people don't know. I mean, you're the first person I've heard of with ataxia. So imagine people reacting in strange ways to some symptoms that might occur.
Well, the Ataxia UK, they're really cool. They give you a little card which says on it, "I'm not drunk. I have ataxia." Because if you can still walk, you tend to stagger around before you fall over.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I've had several people think that I was drunk. I was like, no, I'm not. Before I ended up needing the chair.
Oh, and then
But
being
you
the
laugh
cases
it
where
off
they've
and
been
get on with it.
British. I imagine the cases where they've been British, they must have been, especially the English, they must have been so apologetic after they find out because nothing embarrasses English people more than assuming, even though they all do it quite often, assuming like, oh, look at him, he's blasted. Like,
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad that you highlighted the English there, because obviously
yeah.
I am
Oh no, in
from
Scotland, it wouldn't be a
Scotland.
problem. They'll just be like, oh, he's having a good time. He's all right. Look at that
It's a
guy.
very, very culturally distinct place for sure.
I mean, I get along. I'll happily say that most people probably have figured it out, having listened to this podcast before. I have a strong bleeding heart for Scotland after having lived there, and I've met many Scottish people throughout my life before moving there, and I get on swimmingly with Scottish people. That's because I'm the kind of Danish person where we are very blunt, very forward, both in good and bad ways, and that's really much my experience with a lot of the Scottish people, especially in Glasgow. It's like if they're having a great time with you, they'll be like, "Hey, you're good, you're great." You're awesome.
Exactly.
And if they think you're a prick, they'll be like, hey, you're a prick.
And the accent's bang on that.
I just,
It's,
I'm
you know,
quite
it's,
proud of that. Because I have some
yeah,
Scottish mates, and they do find it kind of funny that it comes on when I talk to Northern English and Scottish people. It sort of comes back. So I apologize to anybody not understanding what I'm saying. I can't claim any degenerative diseases or anything like that. It is just my weird dialect with Scottish.
a wonderful dialect, mate. Wonderful
Oh,
dialect.
fine. I mean, I like it. I think there's something honest about it. And I'm working class, so it fits me really well to speak with a Glaswegian accent. I
Oh,
mean, my dad's a plumber, for fuck's sake, as I've mentioned many times on this podcast. And I just think it fits it. Also because, the Biggie and Billy Connolly, he's a steel worker, so it's all, there's some overlap there and all that. Even
yeah,
though I
absolutely.
never went into steel working or plumber or being a plumber.
Well, steel is in my blood. So my dad was a forger
I imagine.
before he retired.
So
So
I'm thinking, when did you start getting tattooed, Duncan?
So I had my first tattoo just after my 18th birthday, and it was a wholly unimpressive tattoo. It's about that big. It's on my thigh, and it would just poke out if I was wearing a pair of budgie smugglers. Uh, was my act of rebellion. But you know what it's like. You have your first little
Mm,
tattoo, and that's it. You're absolutely hooked. So
mm.
the journey, it all spiraled quite quickly from that point.
But
Um, yeah, and so I think probably it probably took a couple of months before I had a massive tribal
wow.
tattoo on my arm.
I mean,
Yeah,
that's way quicker than I went. I went back a
I've got
year later.
my lovely tribal
All
90s
right.
tribal, and
Fucking
I
hell,
love
man.
it. It's
Yeah.
part of the journey. It does date me a little bit, I guess, being around in the mid 90s. But
I mean, I have a couple of tribals as well. And I got tattooed in the early 2000s, you know.
oh, but I love this. It's epic. It's so
Yeah, oh,
cool.
absolutely. Oh, thank you very much. It was done by a Polynesian lady. She's sadly dead today, but she called herself Erica from America, which was the silliest artist name to have in Denmark, but she loved it. And she was quite cool. And she was half Hawaiian, half Japanese, came here
Oh
by
wow.
way of LA and Hawaii. And weirdly enough, you'll love this as a former skater. She dated, in the 80s, she dated a Mexican Danish pro skater who then took her on a European tour where she saw Copenhagen and just fell in love with Copenhagen. And then she just came back later after they broke up and opened a shop and everything in Copenhagen and all sorts. Like,
Oh, awesome.
yeah, she was pretty rock and roll. I mean, whew.
Well, so many artists are, and I've been super
Yeah.
lucky that so many have become my friends over my tattoo journey. So that's one of the best parts of it, isn't it? Is the people that you meet, and the characters that become your mates.
I've always loved the characters. The only thing I think is annoying, which you'll know as well, being part of marginalized groups yourself. I hate the old guard sometimes gatekeeping too much and being like, oh no, all these new weirdos. The thing is, you were all weirdos too.
Exactly.
And I love all the weird characters. Like we spoke about that girl from Ireland I met, the tattoo artist Lunacy, who we talked about it, and she loves it. She's goth herself, and I was like, yeah, it's fucking awesome. All the new weirdos that are at the scene and doing all sorts of new cool tattoos and styles and all that stuff. You don't get that if it's just all the same old working class people coming out of Manchester or Liverpool doing tattoos and stuff like that, you know?
And I think the world has kind of changed. You go into a
Mm,
tattoo shop now, it's not full of blokes that are talking about girls and
really.
partying. I find that certainly the shop that I spend most of my time in, and I spend a hell of a lot of time in there, is you go in for the crack as much as anything else,
Oh, absolutely. I thought that's why
and
I
the
don't get.
conversation.
I mean, this is a digression of some extent, but that's why I don't get the whole going under, fully under with
Oh
anesthesia
my God,
that's
no.
happening with some celebrities. Because I'm there for the crack as well. I'm there for the talk and the banter and the hangout and all that stuff too. That's why I love day sessions, even with new artists that I haven't tattooed before, because you get to know them, you talk about shit, you know?
Exactly, and it's part of the process,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
being part of an artist process as well. So, a good friend of mine, Jordan, is doing his just coming to the end of his apprenticeship, and I
Oh,
obviously met him a few years ago when he was sweeping the floors and getting the equipment ready. I'm watching him transition into a tattoo artist, and
mm,
him doing lots of tattoos on me. He did one of his first tattoos on a live subject on me, and you're really proud to be part of that journey.
yeah, absolutely.
And I am super proud, and I've got loads of his tattoos because they're really cool, and he's doing interesting take on trad tattoos.
Damn, that's fucking cool. But
But you
that's the
would
thing
meet
that
people like that in any other way. Sorry, Matt.
no, no, sorry, that was me, Duncan. But yeah, that I fully agree. Like the being part of it and somebody developing something new, doing something they love on you, doing something they're passionate about, and then having that forever, you know. Like, it's fucking great.
Exactly.
But I do imagine, and do stop me if I'm exaggerating or this is wrong, but it can't be easy nowadays finding tattoo artists that you can go to because you do require your wheelchair quite
But
constantly,
it,
right?
it has its challenges. Yeah.
Yeah.
But to be honest, most tattoo artists, if that I've wanted to be tattooed
Mm,
by, have we found a way. So I
mm,
was in, as you know, talking about this earlier. I was in Australia for
Mm.
nearly a month at the start of this year as part of my research. I have a big project with a collaborator who's also one of my best friends over there. And I've been wanting to be tattooed by a hand poke artist there called Tom
Mm.
Fonda for a few years, and we never managed to work it out. But his shop is up some stairs. But it was just a question of calling round friends who had tattoo artists, tattoo shops that were accessible,
All
and
right.
he got an accessible shop. In we went, and you can see my eyelids,
Yeah.
which were hand poked, and I got a really meaningful tattoo from him. I got the exact coordinates of my friend's house in Hobart,
Oh, yeah, I
Julia.
saw that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that is the pinpoint of her house. I mean, we've been friends for over a decade, and I've been to visit her and her wife and kids in
Mm.
Tasmania
That's
multiple times.
beautiful.
So it kind of, I was joking with Julia's wife about friendship tattoos, and I thought, you know what, actually, I need to get something to mark 10 years of coming to Hobart. So I
That's
did it, and I sent her an email, and bless her, she burst into tears. Sorry,
oh, that's sweet.
she's
It
like,
is
no,
also
I'm not
far to
crying. I'm
travel.
not
I mean,
crying.
they better not move now. Like,
Well, that's what I said to them. You know, it's permanently inked on my leg now.
you gotta stay. You gotta stay now. Especially because Tasmania, that's already going to Australia, which is the other side of the world, and then going even further to get to Hobart on Tasmania.
It's an interesting journey.
Before anybody wonders why I know where Hobart is, keep in mind the Danish now. Well, I suppose she'll become a queen now because our crown prince just became king.
Yeah,
Is Australian Mary? Our well, is it queen now? I don't know. I don't follow the royals enough to know if she's actually become queen. There's so many weird rules with who becomes queen and not. It's a whole. But anyways, Mary, our king's wife, is Australian and she is from Hobart, Tasmania, if
and
I
yeah,
remember
it's
correctly.
quite an unassuming little town of 100 something thousand people, but it's one of the most beautiful places on earth.
I imagine.
And I love my annual visits. Sometimes I go twice a year for research, and
Wow.
also to as a holiday. Which, you know, being a scientist, mixing work and pleasure is a real privilege, and I really enjoy it. But yeah,
Absolutely.
I had to I often get tattoos when I'm visiting places, as you can
As one
probably
is
imagine.
what to do.
Exactly. So I mean that was an Australian adventure.
All right.
In fact, that was as well.
Oh
Um,
wow. But I'm thinking like and this is gonna I mean I sort of suspect the answer to this already having taught in the UK myself, even though it's just as a graduate teaching assistant and you know being a sociologist having researched tattoos, but it's still worth like pointing out, as I like to do with these episodes with academics that are tattooed. How do your students take it when you have because you have more face coverage than even John does, and that's saying
yeah.
something.
Well, you know, they love it, and I think they respond slightly differently.
Yeah.
It's always quite fun when so I love teaching first years, and
Yeah, I love that too.
I teach a course, co-teach a course called How to Grow a Planet, which
Oh,
is
I
all
mean,
about the evolution.
start small, Duncan.
Exactly. Well, think big or go home, right? And I love it because it's all about how the Earth formed and then how life proliferated really quickly and how it
Mm.
evolved and you know where we are now and looking to the future and obviously the challenges of climate change and food security. And it's just a lovely thing to teach, and it's a subject I'm passionate about. And whenever you have a first year group, obviously I wheel myself into the lecture theatre and I just kind of sit there while the lecture theatre fills up. And then I'll go over to my lectern because Manchester have just been awesome about
All right.
adapting the environment for me. So I've
Oh,
got
that's
really
great.
accessible spaces to teach and do my research. And so, you know, you go up to the lectern and everyone's looking at you. It's like, well, who's this tattooed freak? Isn't he a mature student? And then you introduce yourself as like, I'm Professor Cameron.
Oh man.
What? But I think, and it's, you know, you can tell they're all dying to ask and talk about my tattoo.
Mm. I had
And
that
then,
with my undergrads as well. That you can almost see some of them jittering, and I'm not even as tattooed as you are, Duncan. You can almost see some of them be like, "I want to ask, I want to ask," I'll start out saying, "Hey, tattoo questions are between like after we're done." And the first time, 5 students came up and were like, "Well, why do you get them? Why do you get them?"
yeah, exactly. And that's the amount of conversations that I've had about that, and also about my science inspired ink, because I have
Mm.
quite this
Oh, right,
sleeve
yeah, yeah, yeah.
is, as you can see, is the tree of life built on blocks of lithium and iron. I don't know if you can see that. It's lithium.
Wow.
So this has got quite a lot of things that mean a lot. It's got Darwin's sketch of the tree of life with the I think. So this is in the front cover of the origin of species. It's the
Mm.
diagram that Darwin thought explained
Yeah.
evolution, and various things I've worked on, plants that I've worked on. My first microscope as a child that my mum bought me.
That's nice.
So I kind of felt it was appropriate to mark my career in ink. So
It does seem easy, I would say, because I've just spoken to Leah Elson, Gnarly by Nature, the big science communicator
yeah,
for the podcast as well. She has a full sleeve with her like science as well. And the thing is, it seems easier for STEM people to get like science themed tattoos because for sociology, it's like, no, you really got to think of something abstract that like symbolizes what you do.
it's a bit more niche, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's less there's less physicality to it. As a scientist,
Exactly.
you can hone in on things and diagrams and concepts
Yeah.
that have kind of driven
I mean, even
that
psychology could do that to
pathway.
some extent, but it's just when you're a qualitative sociologist, it's like, I mean, do I get 2 people in an interview? Like,
Microphone. But no, it's been a journey, and the students throughout they absolutely love it. I mean, I think I'm probably one of the few professors, STEM
Mm.
professors, at least in the UK, that's got a full head tattoo.
I mean, that is true. I've seen other STEM professors with tattoos, but never with the head. Like,
But yeah, I think it's part of who you are, and I think
mm,
if you're going to be a good teacher, you have to give some of who you are
mm,
to your students. You put your personality and passion into communication, and you can see it. I'm not one of these professors that just sits and talks at students for 2 hours and then folds up and go home. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in having a dialogue and using that dialogue to frame my students' learning. And I think, being open about me, talking about disability, about queerness, um, about your life it's a way that students then they will talk to you, and they will ask you the things that they really want to ask scientifically as well. But if you're distant, then you don't get that engagement. And the thing that I love about being an academic, I mean, I love my research. I'm passionate about my research, but I'm a passionate teacher.
mm.
There's no point having all of this stuff in my head if it doesn't get out and I don't get to tell someone about it. And there were plenty of people across my career that were different, that didn't
Mm,
conform to
yeah.
the professorial mold. And they're the ones that inspired me, and they're the ones that encouraged and empowered me to do what I've done with my career.
I see that's the same thing for me, even though I was in the social sciences, that the people that really inspired me, especially in my undergrad, were all the people that weren't these traditional tweed wearing ivory tower academics, you know? They were the people like, even though they dressed in the what you call the unofficial uniform, like wearing a blazer or wearing a button-up shirt, they had something quirky about them, you know? They had something about themselves. Well, it was just one guy that had like old earrings that clearly spoke of like maybe a more rock and roll or punk youth. The guy that just had one tuft of hair here, or the guy in a full Japanese bodysuit, tattoos. Like they all had something that stood out. But then when you listen to them, it's clear that okay, they're here for a reason. They
Yeah,
are experts in what they do.
and I
You know?
think some people may kind of look at people like me and you and think, well, what if you look like that? What do you know? And sometimes I enjoy confronting it and going, well, If you want to call me Professor Duncan Cameron, I'm very happy for you to do so. But most of the time I don't. Most of the time I just sit there and I
Yeah,
feel quite smugly satisfied
yeah.
thinking to myself, if only you knew. If
Yeah, but
only.
that's how I feel too. When I mean, I get it often when I'm out, especially in nightlife in Copenhagen, because there's still some stigma here. For example, not all bars let you in when you're tattooed, and then people will be like, "Oh, what do you do? Are you a tattoo artist?" I'm like, "No, no," and then they're like, "Oh, what do you do then? Are you like, do you do drugs? Are you like in a gang or something?" I'm like, "No, neither."
It's quite funny. I get exactly the same questions. It's like, do you work in a bar then if you're not a
Oh,
tattoo?
you would be the funniest drug dealer ever, though, in a with the whole
Will.
wheelchair.
Yeah. You imagine. I'd have to get a decent motor fitted to it. Mine's a little bit, but
It is souped up.
I quite enjoy I enjoy being different, but that's not the reason. That's not the reason
No.
why I look like
Same
this. I
here. I
don't,
never got tattoos to be different. I rather got tattoos. I always big up this guy because I really genuinely resonate so much with his book, and he's a sociologist as well. But Michael Reese, from Wolverhampton, wrote a book called Tattooing in Contemporary Society. And in that book, he talks about this quest for authenticity. And that resonates way more with why I'm
abs-
tattooed than this, because I was always different. Even if I hadn't gotten tattoos, that would still be the case.
yeah,
And I don't get tattoos to mark that I'm different either. I get tattoos to mark that despite pressures from other people, I stick to this. And I
absolutely.
like tattoos. Like that's
Yeah.
the best reason why I have tattoos. I really love how I look with tattoos.
And I think that's the same for me. You know, you have a mental image of what you want to look like.
Absolutely.
And I think that started way back when I was a kid. One of my dad's friends was heavily tattooed, and I was like, right, I want to look
Oh,
like that.
right.
And you know, even kind of 12, 13, you draw what
Absolutely.
shit
Uh,
all over your arms.
I was the
Uh,
same. I was the same.
and you know, you look at it and you think one day that's what they're going to look like. And fast forward 30 years, that's exactly what they do look like. And
I,
I think, as you say, that you know, the quest for authenticity really resonates as well, because I think when the more tattooed I get, like I didn't have my legs particularly tattooed. I had one or two up until about a year, 18 months ago, and I was like, right now I want a couple of leg sleeves of really good trad stuff, and
mm,
a few of my mates that co-own and work in a big tattoo shop in Sheffield, which isn't hugely accessible, but they always carry me up the stairs in my wheelchair, so it's they make it as accessible as possible. And they've all said, you know,
yeah.
when we move, because we'll have to move at some point because we're running
Mm.
out of space, then we will have a wheelchair accessible wheelchair
Oh,
studio,
that's sweet of them. Yeah.
tattoo studio. So I mean that's quite important, quite powerful as well. But
Mm.
I've forgotten where I was going then.
That's
Uh,
okay, Doc.
what was I talking about? The
The
quest
quest for
for
authenticity. Yeah.
authenticity.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, the more I kind of get tattooed, the more I look at how I look and I go, right, I'm getting closer and closer and
Yeah.
closer to that authentic me.
Mm. It's all about what Giddens also talked about, and a guy called Chris Schilling. I can't remember if anybody else mentioned it, but they also talked about the body being and identity through the body being an ongoing project for people. You know, you keep working on yourself, especially if you are very self-reflexive and do it mainly for you and not to please other people or impression management.
Yeah.
You keep working on this to be happier with yourself. You know.
My family didn't know I was as heavily tattooed as I am for a long. Not because I wanted to hide it from them,
No,
because
no,
it's not for you.
no, yeah.
And when I'm ready to talk about it, I will. And and my parents have been incredibly supportive. I think they quite enjoy the process. I remember when I
Same with mine.
started to go bald and lose my hair, which I'm very bald at the back of my head, and I was quite self-conscious about it. And Mum was like, "Well, just get a tattoo on it." I was like, "You're right, actually. That's exactly what I'm going to do."
I
So I
love
did.
that. I love that. My mom once said to me, "You'll love this." Like, I started getting color after my third tattoo, and then I colored up the old ones later on. But at one point, and it was years in, I think it was after my first full sleep, my mom said, I'm so happy you started getting the colorful ones because I'm so tired of these idiots running around because I come from a very like hard, it used to be very hard working class town down south of Copenhagen. And she was like, the others look so scary. I like the colors. I like the colors. I'm like, yeah, cheers, mom.
I started off thinking I was going to be a black and white, black and grey guy.
Yeah, same here.
No, I got bored.
I love color,
The
man. I
colours
love
had to
color.
come, had to show through.
But I'm thinking, Duncan, and do correct me if I'm wrong, because I know that I might think more into this than you might do as a person that's actually disabled. But there must be something more to it after your disability sort of took more hold and you lost functioning your legs. Does that ever factor into you getting tattooed? Like, do you feel that it's more important now as well in a way?
Well, at one level, and I do wonder. I think the drive to get my legs tattooed and get it all done pretty quickly.
Hmm.
Part of that drive was about regaining control of something that I'd lost.
Yeah.
And it was right. Well, you're running away from me, no pun intended. And so
Sorry.
I'm gonna no, don't laugh. Don't apologize for laughing. I think part of it is regaining that control. It's like, well, you won't work the way I want you to work, but you'll look the way I want you to look.
Aye.
So we had quite a quick project where some really talented guys now, right? Jordan and Billy Slate really went to town on my legs. Al Rin and
That sounds, the way you describe it, at least, that it might be the language you're using sounds horrible. I get what you mean, but when you say they really went to town on them, I just feel like, I just get this old school image of somebody went out with one of the old fucking coils. Just...
there were some aspects of that. Certainly, Benji recently did an awesome tattoo on the bone on my shin bone, and that
Ooh.
definitely had to go. When a really good friend of mine, El, did I have a what's it called? A gorilla about that big on my knee. It's absolutely huge, and it just getting bigger and bigger. And I was like, "Are you all right with this?" I'm like, "No, do it."
I'll give you that one, Duncan. That is a big gorilla. That's a big gorilla.
It's huge. But again, it's part of that process of the authentic self and regaining control. And it's quite nice as a heavily tattooed person, if I'm sat in my wheelchair and it's hot, I've got my feet tattooed, so I don't need to wear shoes. So it's quite nice to just whiz around in my wheelchair.
That's a strange perk. I've never heard a wheelchair user use for. Like, hey, I don't have to wear shoes, so I have beautiful foot tattoos. So there you go.
I've got about 30 pairs of
Man, that must be great if you meet a cute lad with a foot fetish as well. There's like,
well, if he's out there, give me a shout.
They are very artistically done as well. If you just go on his Instagram, you'll see.
And well, it's part of the fun, because I think disabled people, we are expected to just not be visible, and when if you post about traveling and the challenges of traveling, the amount of nasty comments you get, well, just don't travel then. Well, why are you bothering to go out?
There's a massive erasure of identity as well for this, because I follow a few disabled people that, funny enough, many of them happen to be queer and tattooed as well, and a lot of them, it's like some of the comments I've noticed they get, and I'm sorry if you've had some of these comments as well. That's just a friend feeling empathy, to be honest. But it's just like, it's like, oh, you shouldn't be tattooed, you're already disabled, or you shouldn't be queer, you already have one gimmick. It's like, do they not realize none of this is like, the tattoos are a choice, sure.
Yeah.
But the other stuff isn't a choice. And the tattoos, even though it is a choice, why the fuck should disabled people not be allowed to get tattoos when the rest of us are?
Well, but there is this strange, it's almost like an infantilization of disabled people, because I can't walk, then I'm akin to a child that's in a wheelchair, in a pushchair. And when people ask me what I do for a living, they're that's so impressive. I'm so proud of you. There's no need to be proud other than the fact that I'm a professor. I'm proud that I'm a
Yeah,
professor.
absolutely.
The
That's
fact
impressive, but
I'm
that would be
disabled has
impressive
nothing to
if you
do
could
with it.
fucking walk as well. Like you're a
Exactly.
professor.
That's the thing that I'm interested in, that I'm proud of myself for
Yeah,
doing. And the disability is just something that you have to get on with.
yeah,
But it, sometimes it's hard to read and hard to see it. But you
yeah.
take stock, you galvanize, and you go, right, well, fuck you all. I'm going to go harder and faster
That
and
was a bit of your
clearer
Scottish
and more
heritage coming
visible.
through there. Well, fuck you.
Yeah, exactly. And it almost drives you
Mm.
to push harder and further. I think I was just telling you that I booked a holiday. The
Yeah.
first time I've really been away on my own since I became fully reliant on the wheelchair.
Yeah.
And I'm meeting up with one of your guests that will have been on before me, John.
Well, the full story is actually Dunk messaged me when he couldn't do one of my episodes and almost substituted Dr. John Brosius in Duncan's stead, which was quite cool of him. And it ended up being a great episode. And now, luckily, I've got a win-win situation. I have Duncan on now. But yeah, you're going to go see him and his new girlfriend, who's also heavily tattooed. And they're going to meet up with another good friend of mine now and another doctor with tattoos, Matt Davis, the ink shrink. So I mean, it's gonna be
It's
quite
gonna
a
be
gathering.
be a lot of fun, and I think we kind of gravitate. John and I met online a few years ago, and he was coming to the UK, so we had the opportunity to go out and have a night out in Soho and
Oh,
hang out, and a really solid friendship was born. A really good friendship.
nice.
And I'm super excited to, well, he's come this side of the pond to hang out with me, so I'm looking forward to going that side and unleashing a gaggle of
Yeah.
very heavily tattooed doctors on Las Vegas. It's going to be fun.
He did try to invite me as well, but I was like, well, first of all, I need to find the money first. And second of all, it's fucking warm where you live, and I'm ginger.
Back to 50, you'll be fine.
I mean, I live in that. I live in that here in Denmark. Like,
Well, you get a little artful kind of parasol like the Victorian ladies have. I'll make you one,
I'll
lads.
look like your manservant if I come there with a parasol. Okay. I'll look like you are way wealthier than you are, and I'm just hired to hold a parasol over you.
Now that's for the banana leaves.
Can you imagine?
It would be quite something. It'd be quite something. Very
Oh,
Roman.
funny. Very Greco-Roman indeed. Weirdly enough, the Greco thing I just mentioned pulled me back to another part of this. Have you got any tattoos that like have to do with your queer identity as well?
I do. I
You
do.
do, because I was suspecting you would.
I only have one really,
Oh,
and it was done by another pal of mine, AJ.
mm.
And it was spooky season, and I'm a massive Masters of the Universe fan.
All
Uh,
right.
so He-Man and
I mean,
She-Ra.
that is a more queer show than people care to admit, to be
Oh my
honest.
goodness, it's a bit of a sexual awakening, He-Man. I'm telling you, 5-year-old Dunk, He-Man. Yes, please. Uh, but so
You have the power indeed.
I was going to get a Castle Grayskull.
All
I'll
right.
send you a picture of it.
Yeah.
You might be able to cut it in to the because it's on my shin. And my friend AJ was like, we could put a pride flag on it, and it would be Castle Grayskull. Like, yes, yes, yes.
That's awesome.
And he's like, I'm going to get cancelled for doing this. I'm like,
I mean,
bloody well not.
they were one step away from being a cartoon village people, to be honest. I
Yeah.
mean, with some of the costume designs in that show, whew, that was. I mean, there must have been like I know this is digressing a bit, but there must have been a queer guy working with some of the art team or something because
Oh yeah, absolutely.
it is such a celebration in a way of queer male culture in a way.
Well, even just a little harness, for goodness sake.
That's what I mean. Like half of the guys wear little harnesses on them, and they're massive, like henge kind of guys.
Oh, now you're getting me all excited.
I'll
Taking
have to
me
go
back to
to.
my
I'll show.
youth.
I'll show.
But it was definitely a retrospective moment that you kind of look back in your life and you think,
Yeah.
who was the first guy you fancied? And it was He-Man. It was without question, it was He-Man.
I'm trying to think back to who was the first girl I fancied because I bet it was some cartoon as well. I mean, I'm a nerd as well. Like, it must have been. It's either Princess Leia because my dad, despite it having to read the subtitles to his two small twin boys, did show us Star Wars way early. So it's either gonna have been Slave Leia or some cartoon character thing.
Well, Star Wars definitely was part of my ink journey as well. So I
Oh
have,
yeah.
again, Han Solo, hello. I do have Darth Vader that big on my
I
spine.
would be lying if I said Harrison Ford wasn't a looker back in the day, to be honest. And I mean, for being over 80 now, I mean, it's not bad, is it? Like,
I probably still wouldn't say no, but anyway.
No, but I mean, it's funny. This whole conversation, this digression, makes me think about a thing that I experience often in this podcast, but how tattoos bring people together. And I think way more than how some people use it to build barriers. At times, it's
Mhm.
even better at breaking them. Like with you and your students, when they start asking you about tattoos and that's also a chance for you to introduce them into your identity, and and
Exactly.
and 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 help them gain that empathy for your situation. You know.
I think you're right, and I think people are often quite. I think most people are kind, and most
Yeah,
people
I
are
agree.
worried about how to interact with someone who's profoundly disabled,
Yeah.
and I get that. I do understand that because it is a touchy subject. Not being able to walk
No,
is shit, but at the same time, I think if there's another reason to have a conversation with you, and in this case, science and my tattoos, like you say, it opens the opportunity to have probably much more comfortable and friendly
yeah,
and non-threatening dialogue uh,
honest in a way as well.
and honest.
I think like I was guilty of this too when I contacted Dunk originally last year to do this interview because I was very scared from the academic point of view. I really wanted to not offend or anything, and I was almost too careful. And Duncan immediately was like, "No, no, we use the word disabled here. Don't give me that differently abled shit." It was his absolute.
There's
He
nothing
basically
wrong.
told me off in a very nice way. He basically told me off. He was like, "I absolutely want to interview with you, but." None of that. None of that.
Not if you can call me differently abled or a
Yeah.
person of courage is my
But I
favorite.
got it after how you explained it. I got it because it's to use a weird term that suddenly got stuck in my head. It's sort of pussyfooting around it too much. Like it's too careful because it's not a
Exactly.
problem with being disabled. It's a problem with how you are treated
As a
because of it.
disabled person,
Yeah.
and
And
just
and, and doing the other stuff sort of hides it. It sort of
yeah,
gives
it,
you the
it,
moral high ground in a way without doing anything.
what it does is it makes the word disabled a dirty word,
Yeah.
and there is nothing wrong with being disabled. I am not as able to do things as an able-bodied person. I can't walk, so there's no differently abled about it.
I mean,
I
no.
am disabled, but I own it because it
Yeah.
is part of my identity, and I think normalizing the word disabled, normalizing visibility of disabled people. I have been I've traveled the world as a disabled person, as a wheelchair user, and the cultural differences to visibility of disabled people
Uh, they must
is
be vast. Like,
is huge. But I think the UK, that there is a cultural, um, I guess it's a cultural hangover that disabled people are not there to be seen. I've even been tried to be shuffled away into a corner in an airport, out of the way, while I wait for a flight. I'm like, no, damn there.
what the fuck?
I've got my own wheelchair. I want to go. I'm flying business
That
class. I
sounds
want
like it's
to go
the
to the
Middle
business class.
Ages and you have leprosy or
Right,
something like that. Like,
exactly. And I mean, what's seeing a disabled person going to do? So I think being vocal about being a disabled person is really important. And to be honest,
Mm.
I've found social media has really empowered me
Yeah,
to be that person, because
absolutely.
I mean there are some amazing disability bloggers out there, Jenny Berry, Nina Tame, and they're amazing and honest, and they've but meeting them online was transformational.
Yeah,
uh, and learning to own my disability and not be apologetic for it
yeah,
was a complete revelation. And as someone that acquires a disability, it's quite a long journey. It's a mourning process
yeah.
almost. You're mourning the person you used to be. I used to play competitive rugby. I would go running. I loved
I mean, you
surfing and
do have the
skating.
face for it. No, sorry, that's a bad joke.
Thank you,
I'm sorry.
thank you.
No, you're
Uh,
very handsome, man. Don't worry.
You'll make me blush now. Stick me on the stage, and I was happy. But you know that
Yeah.
yomping up mountains in Scotland, I spent my weekends climbing mountains with my friends, going to bothies, doing all of the outdoors stuff that I'd moved back to my homeland to do, and to the very north of Scotland, so I could see the breathtaking Munros of the Grampians.
Mm.
And for that all to go, and it's a I really first noticed the problem as a rock climber, that I just suddenly couldn't do moves that I could do, or I would fall off the wall unexpectedly. Uh, and so you mourn who you were, and it takes a while to become comfortable with that image of you as a disabled person. Interestingly, in Australia, I think for the first time, um, I can still walk short distances with sticks. So I was shuffling around on my walking frame in my hospital, in my hotel
I mean, that's a
room.
very different trip.
Yeah, hotel. And and I caught sight of myself in a mirror, uh, and, I was literally just shuffling from the shower seat to my wheelchair, uh, and I then caught sight of myself in a wheelchair, and I thought my search image for me, for how I look, has changed. I don't identify as someone wobbling on a walking frame. I my mental image of me is as someone in a wheelchair. And I
Yeah.
think that moment is really, really important, that you
Yeah.
don't identify as this thing that you were anymore. You identify with what you are, and then you don't just accept it, you embrace it. And it's given me lots of opportunities. I met lots of people because I'm profoundly disabled. I've
Yeah.
had opportunities to do things because of my disability. So that's why disability is just not a dirty word.
No,
It's
I
a
mean,
it's just a part of someone's character.
you very much convinced me of it. I mean, even before we did this interview, absolutely, I've been very mindful of it since. But also, I feel like, but I'm of course biased as as a sociologist, and you are also biased as an academic because we do like to learn. I especially love to learn about people. I bet you do as well, even if it's
Oh,
not an
absolutely.
academic interest. But it's just there's so much to learn out there. It's the same reason why I always make this show in a way that I hope both tattooed people and non-tattooed people can enjoy it, because we can learn about each other. And the
Exactly.
same thing, viewing disabled influencers on Instagram, for example, taught me so many things. Like I was one of those people that had, because it never came up for me, didn't know until I saw somebody explain it, that you can be an ambulatory wheelchair user or you can be wheelchair bound.
Yeah.
It's two different things, but they both need the chair
Yeah.
to live fully. And there's no so and getting better understanding of it, exactly, but not tabooifying disability
Yeah.
could really help a lot of people do better to not be ableist.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of shit that I've had if someone's seen my leg move, I'm going, yes, I can move my leg. I can't stand on it for any length of time because I'll just fall over.
You want
But
to see him
move
shit too?
it.
Like, what the fuck?
And it's yeah, utterly bizarre. That I think anyone sees you in a wheelchair, their decision about you is that
Yeah.
you broke your back doing something dangerous, and that's literally
Yeah.
what most of the negative interactions I've had are. And I'm like, no, I was born with the genetic condition that meant this was always going to happen. I just didn't know until I was in my 30s that that's what was wrong with me. And you know that imperative is important. That there's nothing anyone could have done. There's nothing I could ever have done. And so, what if you fall over and break your back? You know, that is an equally valid way of becoming disabled. So I get really quite angry about people
It's
judging
strange when people
disabled
want to
people
discuss
for
validity of disability. Like it's
exactly,
almost
and
like
they
they're
do
trying to infer you're scamming. It would be the same as saying, "Oh no, you're just queer for the attention." Like
exactly.
it's fucking weird to me that people think you choose this marginalized place to be
And I'm
with
like,
all the
hell,
shit that comes with it.
I would give this away tomorrow if
Yeah.
you know. I guess I wouldn't now because I think
No.
I'd find it very hard to give it away tomorrow. But
No.
would I? Do I want to be in constant pain and falling over and knowing that I'm going to have a short life expectancy? Do I want all of that? No, no, I don't want all of that.
Of course
But
not.
you know, I think you're right. The notion of people trying to validate disability and make a value judgment on the nature of someone's disability is perverse. But
Yeah.
people do, and I discuss with friends that have spinal cord injuries that have had all sorts of awful things said to them about how that injury has happened, and you'll think, what
I
planet are
mean,
these people on?
I can't remember what she's called. I think it's Disabled Eliza or something like that.
Yeah, she's
She's,
awesome, disabled
yeah,
alone.
but I saw her post once about how she was on the tube in her wheelchair, and some lady, because she got up to like go for I haven't been on the tube in a while. I hate the tube, but she got up for some reason, valid reason. She needed to get something or whatever, or fix something with her chair. And a lady gets angry at her, pissed off on behalf of disabled people because she doesn't need the chair. What the fuck does this lady know? How about
It,
instead of educating yourself?
yeah,
Like,
exactly,
fuck.
exactly. It's challenging, but I think that's part of the reason that I do talk about my experiences as a disabled person on my social media, and part of the reason why I push myself to do things that are challenging as a disabled person is to prove that you can do it and prove to
Aye.
myself that I can still do it. And there will come a time where I can't travel anymore, and I know that I accept it and I understand it, but that time isn't now. And wherever I can still do things, okay, it means that I have to save up. And I'm fortunate enough that I've got a job that allows me to save up and pay for a business class flight to
Yeah.
make it easier and make it less painful. I although I have this disability, I also consider myself an incredibly fortunate person.
I
I've
mean,
had an amazing career in something that I love, and it enables me to lessen the impact of my disability,
yeah.
and I'm lucky in that respect.
I mean, you've worked hard as well. Let's not diminish diminish your hard
No,
labor
I
too.
have,
But
but
there is
loads of
some
people
amount
work
of
hard.
luck to it as well. As I know as well, it's not for a lack of hard work, and I'm very honest about it in this podcast that I'm unemployed at the moment. It's not for a lack of, as people hopefully can tell by the podcast as well, that I'm unemployed. There is amount of luck to it as well, no matter how hard you work.
Yeah,
I absolutely recognize that, but there's still, absolutely also your hard work. Like, you do a lot of good stuff, not just as an academic, but also you may not be famous or anything like that, but you still try to create awareness and help educate people about disability and that, and queerness for that matter, and how I seem to recall you made a post at one point about people thinking that tattoos were too much. It's like, no, that's part of you as well. You like tattoos. Why should it
exactly,
change just because you're queer or you're disabled? Uh,
exactly.
uh, I was very
It's all part
positively
of your person.
surprised. Yeah, exactly, yeah. But I was very positively surprised when I was at the Brighton Tattoo Convention. There's a previous weekend at the time of recording, because I saw some disabled people there, and they tried to, I don't know how successful they were, because you forget to notice these things when you're not yourself disabled. But I was happy that at least it didn't seem like anyone in the crowd were like, "Oh, you shouldn't be here," or anything like that. And I like seeing more of that in the tattoo community. More people be like, "No, fuck it, man. No matter, we don't care if you have a wonky leg, a weird eye, missing half your body or whatever. You can get tattoos. There's nothing that physically prevents you from that, and tattoos are awesome."
And I think as a community, tattoo people, not universally, but
No,
we
no, no.
we tend to be more open
Yeah.
in our thinking.
I
Uh,
think there are a lot more of them because we sort of marginalize ourselves sometimes.
I think part of the thing also is, reaching out to
Yeah.
the disabled community, and I think the my generation and the generations younger that are in the tattooing community, they very much take that role very seriously. So
Yeah.
my two of my closest friends, Billy Slate and Niall Wright, they're starting the Seven Hills Tattoo Convention in Sheffield, which
Oh, wow.
will be happening later this year, end of this year, towards the end of this year. And one of the first things they did was to come and talk to me about accessibility and
That's awesome.
where the spaces that they were thinking about, what would need to be done to those
Mm,
spaces to make it accessible to disabled people. And
mm.
that was one of the first things that they're interested in. So I think it is very front and center of people's
Yeah.
minds. And
Yeah. I
those two
think so too.
people are just very self-aware, nice people, and would have done that anyway, irrespective of the fact that one of their close friends is a wheelchair user. But I think that awareness of inclusion, not as a tick box, because I've been a tick box as a queer academic for so
Oh,
much
yeah, I can
life.
imagine. I can imagine.
But I think we're moving away from ticking boxes. I
Yeah.
think it's a hell of a long way to go, but certainly
Yeah.
within the tattoo community, if the building, the space has been an impediment to getting a tattoo from someone, then the community has removed that impediment by finding a space
Absolutely.
for it
Like
to
there's
happen.
so much that I spoke with several artists about it in a positive way at the Brighton convention. It's so nice to see that there's no longer that whole because even when I was younger, even going to conventions, even just in 20, I mean, Denmark is a bit behind the times, to be honest. But in 2015, when I went to my first tattoo convention ever, there was still that kind of like thinking back on it now, there wasn't any space for queer or anything like that, even in 2015. So it's so beautiful to see such a massive convention like the Brighton one, because that's quite a massive one and well-known one. There was fucking everywhere. Like it's great
Why
to
it's one
see.
of
There
the
was,
gayest cities in
and they
the
even
UK.
that's also the other part. So it also fits very much with the Brighton culture. But I think there's still space for it everywhere else too. Like
Yeah, I
at the
agree.
Scottish convention as well in Edinburgh, I think there's sort of space for it. I haven't seen anybody that any longer actively is like, no, fuck these bump boys. We don't want them here. So,
And I don't, I honestly I think those people obviously still exist, but
oh, absolutely.
the days of going into a tattoo studio and you being absolutely terrified and these people kind of shouting at you and it being a horrible experience, which frankly frames quite a few of my early tattoo experiences.
I'd
Uh,
imagine.
it, it's the world has changed,
Yeah,
and I think now my experience as
yeah,
of being tattooed, of being part of that community, of being part of a very inclusive,
yeah.
very open community.
I mean, it doesn't compare in the same way, but it's sort of the same way I felt about it being a nerd. Like there wasn't space for that originally in its two world. Whereas nowadays it's like, no, half the fucking artists that are doing it are massive nerds as well.
I think celebrating diversity is
Yeah,
something
exactly.
that
Absolutely.
that that
Thank you
the
for
world
pulling
is
me out of the
embracing.
hole I was thinking that. That was my point. Like, I think that's really awesome to see. All sorts of ethnic groups being represented, more different sexualities, different ability levels. So, to put it in a weird way, I guess they're all getting more representation.
Yeah, yeah.
Like for example, first artist I had on here as a guest was Robbie Ripple, who has a missing one leg.
Yeah.
Lost that in an accident. It was also just awesome. Like he fucking does jokes about it and all that shit now.
And that's what, it's very individual. That's the one thing I will say, that
Yeah.
I am very comfortable talking about having
Mm.
ataxia, about how that impacts me as a person, as a scientist, as a queer person. But some people don't want to. I mean, for some
Yeah.
people, reliving that diagnosis is traumatic. It's a
Mm.
traumatic event, and some people don't want to talk about
Mm.
what's happened to them. And I think one thing that frustrates me a little bit with social media is a lot of people now assume, because we are entering a much more open world,
Yeah.
that everyone has a right to know what's wrong with you.
Yeah, no, no. A little bit of politeness and empathy would go a long way there. Like, ask, like,
Why
is
do
it
you
okay?
need to know? If somebody
Exactly. Yeah,
doesn't want
there's
to
no
talk
need to
about it,
ask
why do
either.
you need to know?
But
It's
my
it's
idea
not
is also
relevant.
just if you really can't help yourself, just be polite. And the first question should
Yeah,
probably be, "Are you okay to talk about it?" And then respect if they say, "I don't want to."
I don't want to talk exactly.
Yeah.
And I think Nina Tame did a fantastic piece
Mm.
around fundraising for children with disabilities. That you see all these videos of kids telling you what's wrong with them and looking very sad, and she's like, no, that's morally wrong to be
Yeah.
forcing these children to talk about their private
Mm.
medical diagnoses just to try and get money.
Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely.
and if people haven't seen it, Nina Tame did the most phenomenal little reel about it, and it's really worth a watch because it's quite eye-opening.
I mean, even just thinking about the ethics of it, you should never involve people in that especially kids, unless you're absolutely certain they're open to talk about it. And for kids, that's a very difficult thing to do. So I'd probably have gone for young adults instead, people that can
Exactly,
give more informed consent, and they can have a bit of reflexivity about, do I want to talk about this? Do I want this to be out there for
exactly.
others to see for a long time? Kids can't.
Yeah.
I would never do that with kids.
And it
They can't
frustrates
do that.
me. But that's again, it's part of that. Well, you're disabled and you're visibly
Mm.
disabled, therefore you must want to talk about your disability. And in my case, I'm happy to do so because it was rare. No, at the time of filming, it was World Rare Diseases Day yesterday, with the
Mm.
last day in February, and today is World Wheelchair Users Day, which feels quite
Oh.
appropriate for me.
Yeah,
Um,
quite appropriate to record the episode on this day as well.
yeah, absolutely. And actually, I hadn't even thought about that. But as World Rare Diseases Day, I talk about my
Yeah,
my condition and my diagnosis because, like you said, you'd never heard of anybody with ataxia.
yeah.
I had never heard of anybody with ataxia, and uh, and at the time that I was diagnosed, so I got told I got this disease that I didn't know anything about.
Must have been baffling at the time. It's like,
It
okay,
was so
cool.
baffling. I was
Where
like,
did you
what
get
the hell
that
is this?
Narnia? Where's that from? Like,
And to be fair, I have the most phenomenal consultant. I mean,
oh, that's good. That's
my
good.
neurologist, consultant neurologist, is just brilliant. And he sent me all of some pamphlets to take away and read, and it's terrifying. So I made a decision as someone that has a bit of a platform as a professor,
Hmm.
that I was going to talk about it. And I sit on the patient advisory group
Oh,
for the
wow.
Sheffield Ataxia Centre. I've just joined it, uh, and I think if I can do something, as you've probably seen online, I work quite closely with Ataxia UK
Yeah.
to do campaigning and raising awareness of the condition. Because in the UK, there's about 10,000 adults and 500 children currently diagnosed. There's not many of us.
It's not many at all, but it's still enough that, awareness could be
We're still
useful,
10,000 people. And because it's a rare disease, the opportunities to research
Yeah.
the condition
Tons.
are really small, and to manage the condition. No, it's not a single condition; it's a family of 300 conditions
Ah, right.
that that
It's
all
one
in
of
their own
those
way,
where it's a myriad, a tapestry of
and lots of different causes,
yeah.
but united by a symptom. And that symptom
Yeah.
is that your body destroys your cerebellum, which is bottom part of your brain and essential for
Oi.
your complex functioning. And that's why eventually we lose the ability to speak and to swallow. But the legs tend to come first.
Yeah.
But being able to have those conversations in an open and non-combative way, I think is really important, which is why
Yeah.
I've chosen to put myself out there, and maybe to use my platform as a queer professor to say something about intersectionality and
Mm.
what it's like.
But I think that's also exactly why I wanted you on this podcast, but with a bit more of the tattoo side in mind, because I think we need some more intersectionality in the two worlds sometimes. And a lot of people are getting, as we spoke about, we are both quite positive about the developments in the tattoo world. We both see a lot of beauty and a lot of compassion and a lot of empathy coming through, especially the younger generations. But it's never a bad idea, I feel, to make people more aware that you could be loads of different things at the same time, and then you're also like tattoos, and it's great to make space for that, because I think there's still some people are like, oh no, that guy, he's a gay guy, and it's like, no, that's not, no, that's Thomas. Thomas
Yeah,
is 117 other things than just into
just,
men,
just the
like,
gay guy.
yeah,
Yeah, and I get fed up of being the gay guy or and I've been professionally, and I won't elaborate, but in professional situations where I'm obviously there because I'm the gay guy,
yeah,
and I've been in professional situations where my disability has very much been treated as an inconvenience, so you call it out,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and I think part of the thing I love about being tattooed is people don't forget you.
No, I love that
Uh,
as well.
and it's a really powerful way of making of using being heavily tattooed as a platform because people tend to remember who you are. They remember your tattoos before they'll ever remember your name, which is great. And
I
I
mean,
get
you'll never forget the guy who came in a wheelchair with a claw on his face.
that. And a chain running across
Yeah,
the
that's
forehead.
right.
And I think that's quite cool. I think it's also
Absolutely.
part of the relationship, going back to what we're talking about with my students,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
being a different face in this sea of tweed it is quite refreshing, I think.
yeah,
Uh, and I
absolutely.
kind of hopefully if people remember the fact that I'm covered in tattoos, they remember that I'm in a wheelchair and this is the condition, and there is then more awareness about it.
I
So
think I think so. I would wager so that often people chain these things together just as we do with our tattoos. It may not have anything to do with anything, but you sometimes remember like, oh yeah, I got this done then, and that was this. At that time, I was talking to this person, and we were doing this thing. I think in the same sort of vein, I think your students absolutely also recall that. Yeah, that's Professor Duncan. He's in a wheelchair, and he's queer, and he's fucking awesome, and he has all these cool tattoos and all that. Well, I at least think you're awesome, but I mean, I'm biased. I don't tend to invite people in here I don't find at least a little bit interesting.
that's really kind. But I think, most of my tattoos are stuff that is just stuff that I like.
Yeah.
Uh, and but like you just said there, what's really nice is they can start pointing at bits of my body and going, yeah, I was here when I had that done, and this is the guy that did that, and we've since become really good friends. And I like that mind map of
Yeah,
of your life.
that's the first time I heard that described as a mind map, but it really works. It kind of works really well
It
with
does,
it.
doesn't it? Because I think it definitely is. And
That's
for
all. That's almost works better than that quote people always use from Johnny Depp about it being a biography. I mean, I get it, especially as a sociologist, I do like that idea of the biography on the skin, but a
yeah,
mind map sort of works better
yeah.
in a way.
As a scientist,
Yeah.
I'm going to go mind map over biography.
So now it starts. We finally got there. The social sciences versus the STEM.
Well, I do dabble in the social sciences as well.
Absolutely, absolutely, I would argue.
And again, I'm all about intersectionality
Hmm.
in who I am, and intersectionality in what I do. I I would I've never been defined by the STEM subject that
No.
I trained in, and I work with the arts, and I work with the humanities, and I do it in a meaningful way, not as some scientists just bring in a social scientist at the end to do a survey. I'm like, for goodness sake, um, if you want to do something profoundly different, you have to
Yeah,
develop meaningful collaborative research
yeah,
programs. And
absolutely.
I've been very privileged to have worked with some very famous uh, 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 social scientists like Peter Jackson, for
Yeah,
example, fellow of the British Academy, who's a
yeah.
very close
But
friend.
not the
Not
producer
the
and film director.
no, not the director, but he's an incredibly famous human geographer
Mm.
who I've learned a huge amount from, and he always says the same about me, and our academic partnership has been really exciting and defined by intersectionality. So
Awesome.
I guess I am Professor Intersectionality in every possible direction.
Honestly, yeah, it's quite a crisscross across the board. It's awesome. Speaking of it, I kept you for over an hour now, Duncan. So I think we better so I don't take away your important time too much. Round off a bit. So I'm curious now, and I think I want to do this maybe to tease a bit because I've loved talking about your relationship to your students. What would you say to them about getting their own tattoos?
I have my students have come to me for tattoo
Mm.
advice, and I've said, know that you want a tattoo. Don't
Yeah,
overthink.
absolutely,
Don't
absolutely.
overthink what it is, because once it's there, you'll love it. I've never really regretted getting a tattoo,
No,
and I said, but just make sure you know you want it. And as long as you know you want a tattoo, don't overthink what it is, because
no.
you'll change your mind throughout your life. So it's you're freezing a moment in time on your skin, and I think that's why it's such a powerful thing to do.
See, the thing I would add to that piece of advice would be that do it for yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
Don't because a big pet peeve of mine because there's very rarely there are occasions where they work and you end up very lucky and you never regret it. But most of these tattoos you get on a group holiday or something else, or because you all play video games together, no, it doesn't hold up. Absolutely, if you want to celebrate that connection, do it, but do make sure it's coming from here.
Yeah, it's yours. It's not someone else's. I
Yeah,
agree.
because else you will, I almost guarantee it, you will regret it. Because
Yeah, for sure.
life, as Duncan just talked about, life happens, and for better or worse, sometimes you just grow apart, but then you also grow apart from that tattoo, and then you're gonna end up hating
The
it.
laser comes out, and nobody likes the laser.
No, fuck that. Ooh, I've avoided it for now. I have luckily never regretted any of mine to get them lasered. So, oof, oof. Uh,
Yeah, don't go there.
I'd rather do a blast over and still be able to see a bit of the old tattoo sometimes and all that stuff. Not getting lasered. Well, Duncan, here at the end, first of all, I want to thank you so much for being on here.
Oh,
Like,
thank you
I've
for inviting me.
really enjoyed this. It was nice finally getting to talk to you, go through the digital medium face to face.
Well,
And
hopefully next time you visit the UK, we'll go to hang out in person.
I would hope
Be
so.
love to host you in Manchester or Sheffield.
I mean, I do mean to visit those places. But Duncan, do plug yourself a bit. Where can people find you and yourself? I mean, you are teaching out of Manchester, right?
So I'm a professor at the University of Manchester in the Institute of Biotechnology and in the Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences. So if you're interested in the kind of work that I do, you can find me on Manchester's Research Explorer. I'm really active on social media, and particularly on Instagram. So
Mm.
you can find me and all my links on Instagram, and I'm at Wheelie Dr. Dunk with underscores in between the words. You'll find me. Dunk with a
You are
C, you'd say.
you're absolutely not gonna be in any sort of confusion when you find his profile. There's only one really Dr. Doug, I assure you.
Cheers, man.
Well, I've loved talking to you, man. It's
Um,
actually been eye-opening for me as well. I love learning when I do these episodes, and it's been a blast, man.
yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me.
And to anybody listening in or watching, hopefully watching as well, because there is a visual aspect. Uh, do enjoy it, hopefully, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Hi, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode with the charismatic, jovial, and all around awesome Professor Duncan Cameron, or Prof. Dunk, as he likes us friends to call him. He's what an incredible guy, proudly queer, proudly disabled, proudly heavily tattooed, and an absolutely passionate teacher and scientist. inspiring, honestly, and it's so nice to see people like him showing off that whether you're an academic or a plumber or any other profession, doesn't matter. You can look the way you want to and be great at what you do, and the society around us need to respect and realize this. And hopefully it'll inspire people out there, both if you work in the tattoo industry, if you're part of the tattoo world, or if you're just interested or curious about it, to think more about this and be more accepting of diversity both inside and outside of the world of tattooing. But enough about this episode. Next time we'll be starting off round 6 of the podcast. How amazing! Round 6 is starting. And to kick it off, I'm talking to the awesome Erica Chandler, also known to a lot of people online as the tattoo admin coach. We're going to be talking about a bit of a different aspect of the tattoo industry, which is growing, and I personally, spoiler alert, as a sociologist, think it's a great thing. Also, as a tattoo collector, I think these people often improve the tattoo experience, which is the whole studio slash shop manager. There's other versions of the title as well. People that more studios seem to be hiring these days and paying to manage both emails, schedules, buying stock, all that stuff. But we'll be getting more into that next time. So you'll have something to look forward to. And I thank you so much to anyone that supported the podcast. We're gaining popularity slowly but surely, and it's amazing to see. Thank you, everyone. And I'll see you around.